controls producing a great print? Well, previously we've talked about press must be absolutely rigid. It's the foundation to your print, like the foundation of your house. You don't want any movement in the foundation of your house or your print. You need a really tight screen, and that screen needs to be parallel at all times to the shirt that you're printing on. If you have those two conditions met, then what else do we need to know to produce top quality work? Most people think the amount of ink going down is determined by the pressure of the squeegee. That's really not correct. You never want to use pressure as the method of getting ink onto a shirt. If you have too much ink down, your ink will probably have a shine to it, a gloss to it. If you don't have enough, then the image is weak. How do we control that? What are the factors involved if we're not going to use pressure? And I'm going to go through what some of those are. Well, obviously the squeegee angle is important. And most people know this, that if you have a lower angle, you're deflecting more ink down than if you have a higher angle. So when you first print, you want to find the angle that you're happiest with for the type of job. And what I find with a lot of people when they print, they tend to rotate their wrists. So they're changing the angle when they print. So what I recommend you do is to set the angle, be very conscious of what angle, and so that you don't rotate your wrist. Instead of pulling your arms back, instead step back. That way you can keep the angle constant while you're printing, okay? And stepping back does something else for you. The second element besides the angle is the speed. And most people, when they pull their arms back, tend to pull back very quickly. Well, if you don't have enough ink going down, instead you step back, you will step back slower than you pull your arms back, so more ink will go down if you go slowly, and less ink if you go quickly. So stepping back is slower, more ink goes down, and that's what most people need. So the angle and the speed are affecting how much ink goes down. What about pressure? On a prior video we showed using a piece of plexiglass when we set up so that we have the thickness of the plexiglass as our off contact distance, less the thickness of the shirt. And we also showed a technique of putting a piece of cardboard on the neck of the platen in order that the frame itself does not bow down. So we maintain that frame absolutely parallel to the platen. The only pressure we should be using is enough to close that off contact distance. And if you see the blade bending up, then it's too much force. You do not want that blade bending. If the blade is bending, then you don't know what the angle is. So this particular squeegee is a 70 durometer. It's a fairly soft blade. Well, you can get them where they're harder, and you can get triple durometer. So if you have like a triple durometer like 75, 90, 75, that 90 core in the center of the blade is going to be a lot stiffer than this 70 durometer. And therefore you'll be able to track your angle on the squeegee much better. So those are some of the elements. Here are some more. And you'll know these. For example, mesh count. 110 mesh, which is 110 threads per linear inch, will have larger holes in the mesh than 305 mesh, 305 threads per linear inch. So 305 is going to release less ink than will 110. But many people will be surprised to know that for each manufacturer of mesh in the world, and there are about 5 or 6 of them now, each manufacturer produces typically 4 different versions of each mesh count. So there are 4 different 305s. Well, what could be different about those 305s? And the answer is the diameter of the thread. So you can have a large diameter or a small diameter, but you still have 305 per inch. So if you have a large diameter thread, that means the space left for the ink to pass through is smaller than if you have a small diameter thread. So which mesh count is affecting how much ink is going down. Therefore, you want to always know where your mesh is coming from so you have a consistency to the amount of ink passing through that screen. So that's mesh. What about screen tension? We know that from talking previously, low tension will put out more ink than high tension. What about the blade on the squeegee? These blades, when you run your finger on the edge, it feels like you're going to cut your finger. These blades are absolutely square. And we keep them square because we made a squeegee sharpener. This is real simple. All it is 200 grit sandpaper on a flat board, stand a squeegee straight up, and then get strips of metal or wood, or we happen to use Delrin, but you could use something else, and you screw those strips into the board so you're supporting the squeegee in a vertical position. Before each job, we just run the squeegee through there a couple times, and all we're doing is polishing the edge, just like the barber at the barber shop who takes a leather strap and the razor, and he goes up and down that leather strap with his razor blade. He already has a sharp razor. He's just polishing that edge, because we know sharp cuts better than dull. Sharp scissors, sharp knives in the kitchen, whatever, always cut better than dull. And we are cutting ink, so we need sharp, and we should sharpen our squeegees before each use. So what you want to do is maintain your off contact. At first, until you get sensitive, step back for the first 5 minutes of printing. That will make you sensitive to avoid rotating your wrists, from changing the angle, from changing the pressure, or putting too much pressure on the squeegee when you print. And what you'll do is look at the print result and decide, do you have enough ink or not enough ink? And if you have too much, then you want to raise your angle, which will give you a little bit sharper print but less ink. Or if you don't have enough ink, you can either lower the squeegee blade or slow down on the stroke. Either way will help you get more ink down. You'll notice I have two squeegees here, wooden handle and aluminum. The aluminum allows you to have a stiffer blade. It gives better control over the blade because the pressure is all the way across the blade, as opposed to wood, the pressure is on these points. And if you don't sharpen the blade, what will happen is these pressure points will cause the blade after time to warp. So you may want to put those squeegees on glass or something you know to be absolutely flat to see if you can see light coming underneath the squeegee blade. You want those blades absolutely flat. If they're not, it's going to affect the amount of ink that's going down. Well, we have talked about a number of variables to screen printing in terms of what controls the amount of ink. And hopefully, the more of these points you pick up on, the better quality will be your printing.